Hi, everybody. Good evening and happy Tuesday. Thank you for joining us this evening for Food Literacy for All. Many of you, I'm sure, have been here either as students or as community members, week over week. But we welcome everybody and are grateful that you are all here. This week, we'll have with us Pedro Charbel sharing about solidarity kitchens in Brazil, fighting hunger and building change. My name is Julius Buzzard. I am one of the co-instructors of Food Literacy for All alongside Amanda Edmonds. Food Literacy for All is an initiative, a course that is put together with a number of folks, organizations throughout the community, including those here at the bottom, Pite, Seas here at University of Michigan, Growing Hope, Oakland Avenue Urban Farm, the Detroit Food Policy Council, Detroit Black Food Sovereignty Network, and the Sustainable Food System Initiative. In addition to Amanda and myself, we have with us tonight Taylor Julene, our graduate student instructor, and Sammy Maldonado, our course coordinator, as well as Marissa Stafford, who's helping with all the tech so you all can see it and engage with us this evening, as well as all of these other folks who have poured into this course and made it what it is. A couple announcements up front, and then we'll dig into the content for the course tonight. A reminder for students that the fall 2026 U of M Sustainable Food Systems course is now live. So you can scan this QR code and learn more about all of the courses that are coming up this fall. It'll also be in the newsletter. So if you can't get it that way, you'll be able to get it online as well. And then we are coming towards, we're in the home stretch for our course. We've got just a few classes left, including an in-person course on April 14th. That's Fast Food for Thought. It's hybrid, so you can engage and hear what's going on online as you have been throughout the semester. But we invite you to join us on April 14th in the Dana building. You can RSVP. We'll put the link in the chat to hear from each of these wonderful folks from across the University of Michigan talking about how their work intersects with food and the food system, and an opportunity to engage with them as well.
All right, so most of you know this by now, but every week we have around 20 students share a reflection on the required materials for the week. And this week, students reflected on the documentary that Pedro shared out with all of us. I think it's really fun to showcase sort of the diversity of students that we have. Lots of undergrads, some master's students, and some doctorate students. So we have Tony here, a Doctor of Law student, reflecting on the documentary.
This documentary was really eye-opening for me. It reminded me of a quote. I don't know if it's a quote attributed to John Lewis or just kind of a common activist adage, but everyone wants the revolution, no one's willing to do the dishes, or everyone wants revolution, but no one's willing to wash the toilet or run an Excel sheet. And the quiet, silent, steady, consistent work of these three women cooking hundreds of meals for the homeless workers movement just reminded me that any action or movement or revolution requires people doing this solid, consistent work. And it was really awesome to see these women discover themselves and their strengths and the power that they had in making meals and cooking food. And so really heartwarming and inspiring. Another inspiring portion was just that the little quote from I don't remember who it was at the beginning, but the access to the land in Brazil for all, and this quiet undertone of increasing and empowering people that have historically not had access to food and land. Just kind of that through line in Brazil that's been found across the world in various movements. But that was really great to see.
Great. Thank you so much, Tony. Moving on. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, moving on into how to engage in the Zoom webinar. So there are lots of us here, 205 of us right now. We encourage you to use the chat for general comments or any burning questions. If you resonate with anything that Pedro is sharing, go ahead and use the chat. If you're having technical difficulties, use the chat. We will have Q&A kind of throughout this session. So please use the Q&A feature specifically for any questions dedicated to Pedro. And if you would like to use the live or the live transcript closed captioning feature, that's available to you as well. And then every week we ask a question to sort of gauge where the audience is at, because the audience looks different every week and we're all sort of in different places with our engagement in this work. So this week we are asking, where do you see your own life intersecting with global food and housing systems? Is it through your work or profession, through your studies, through organizing, through your consumption, through your personal experience? Maybe you know about these systems but don't see a connection to your life, or you haven't really thought about this before. We will let those answers roll in, and in the meantime, I will plug our social media. So you can find us on Instagram at UMishSFSI, the same handle on LinkedIn and Facebook. And then we post all of our recordings since the beginning of this webinar series. It's been 10 years on YouTube. So it's all there and accessible and free. We'll drop those links in the chat now. And we can end this poll. It looks like most people engage with food and housing systems through their consumption. And then the second would be through academic study or research. So thank you so much for sharing. And we will move on now to introduce our speaker. So we're very excited to have Pedro Charbel with us tonight. Pedro holds a master's in sociology and a bachelor's in international relations from the University of São Paulo. And he's an active member of the homeless workers movement, otherwise known as MTST, as well as the Socialism and Liberty Party. And he's deeply involved in social struggles in Brazil and around the globe. Right now, he is the chief editor, is it Jatobá? The social environmental magazine from Lauro Campos and Marielle Franco Foundation, and coordinates the Enough Soy Alliance. I'm excited to learn more about that. A coalition of civil society organizations and social movements fighting agribusiness, monoculture expansion in Brazil. And his debut film, which our students watched, There Is No Free Lunch, highlights the importance of MTST's solidarity kitchens and has been showcased at major festivals in Brazil and Europe, and has earned several awards. So, Pedro, whenever you're ready, you can take it away.
Thanks so much, Taylor, for the introduction, Julius, for the invitation. Happy to be here with you all. The idea today is to share a little bit about the Solidarity Kitchens in Brazil and some knowledge of the homeless workers movement in general, but not only to talk about the importance of fighting hunger, of course, and the importance of food in our lives, but also how these mechanisms can be a tool to build social change, really. But before we get started, I just want to check how many of you had the chance to watch the film Taylor was referring to. So if you can just reply that so I have a sense and I can modulate my talk accordingly. And of course, if we hadn't had the chance, I guess we can find a way to get you the link afterwards for those who are not enrolled students.
And students, give me one moment because iClicker logged me out, but we're back in and I'm running the poll now. Okay, there we go.
So basically, this documentary follows three women, Socorro, Gerayuji, and Biza, and they're Black women from the biggest favela in Brazil. which is located next to Brazil's capital, Brasilia. And they are responsible for one of the solidarity kitchens run by the homeless workers movement. But for Lula's inauguration, right after Bolsonaro government, they are in charge of producing meal for the thousands of people that are arriving in Brasilia for the celebration, for the inauguration. So it's a deep dive into the importance of the movement as an organizing tool, but also captured this particular moment in Brazil and helps us to understand the importance of social movements to avoid fascist governments to get into power. So just okay, a lot of people have watched it. Cool. So let's find a way for the others to watch it afterwards. And the reason I really that we think that this film is so powerful is that it brings us an invitation really to get organized and to learn about how connections to other human beings are a powerful tool to overcome neoliberal strategies that are dismantling our social structures, allowing neoliberalism to go so heavily and extreme right wing to grow so fast, but also denying people from connection to each other. But while that happens, the other side is very much connected between them. And I brought some pictures just to illustrate what I'm trying to raise here and the importance of our conversation tonight. So the guy in the first picture is Jair Bolsonaro, who was the Brazil's president before Lula's term right now. And he led us to a very horrible era in our lives, not only because of COVID, but especially because he dismantled social policy, fought workers' rights, attacked women, LGBT community. He was basically defending the dictatorship times, the tortures that perpetrated the most horrendous violations, was trying to further militarize our police, and he was deliberately giving away our sovereignty and offering it to Mr. Trump. As you can see in his hat, he doesn't hide how he adores Trump and the ideology he represents. His fascist government led us to thousands of people dying and starving in Brazil. And that's what the picture next to him represents. This is a picture during his government in which it became very common, unfortunately, for families to go into the leftovers of butchers' houses, trying to find bones with more pieces of meat on them, so they would boil them into some sort of soup and feed themselves with that bone water in order to survive. The guy below him is his son, Flávio Bolsonaro, who is now running for presidency. And as part of his campaign, he went to the US just last week in this adorable CPAC conference, addressing the US audience and openly asking Trump to support him and his father political project in winning over Lula this year. We are having elections again in Brazil in October, and the extreme right wing is very much aligned globally, as you know. This is a global project of injustice, and this is why it's so important that we are here learning about projects of justice that are happening, and we can have exchanges between them at academic level, at grassroots level, at human level, because that's what they want us not to do. And the picture next to him is the coup attempt led by Bolsonaro and his comrades, which is the reason that he's in jail right now. I hope something similar happens in your context soon. So they encouraged their supporters to invade the Supreme Court, the National Congress, the executive office. And this picture is taken from the window of the Supreme Court, and you can see the Brazilian Congress there and all the Bolsonaro supporters invading our capital, similar to what you also had in the US when Trump didn't accept the results of the election. So the fact that the extreme right wing is very much connected internationally and leading us to very similar social problems stresses the importance of us having this conversation tonight. And I hope that by the end of my presentation, the examples that I bring of what we did once we faced our fascist government can also inspire you on, research and actual measures in your daily lives, community, or whatever. Um, I'll be speaking about the homeless workers movement experience, the MTST by its acronym in Portuguese, Movimento dos Trabalhadores Sem Teto. This is the biggest urban social movement in Brazil. So before I go into the food area and our experience with the Solidarity Kitchen, I want to talk a little bit about the urban situation in the country and why housing movement is so important in our context. When we say homeless workers movement in Brazil, we're not referring to some idea that you might have of a movement of homeless people that live on the street as a homeless person you would perceive in the US sometimes. We're talking about, in general, people facing housing deficit. Okay, so not necessarily they're living on the streets, but they're paying abusive rents, they're living in occupied buildings, they're living in very temporary ways and arrangements or in the back of their family's house. They don't have a proper house to live. Those are the unhoused, those are the homeless as we perceive in Brazil, and how our movement and where our movement comes from. But before we go any further, just if you can try to guess, really, what's our housing deficit? Just for context, I added here what's the U.S. population and the U.S. housing deficit, so you can try to guess in comparison, considering your own experience, and from there we continue on why this movement is so important. So if you can just guess, what do you think Brazil's housing deficit is, considering that our population is around 203 million people, right? More or less, 50% less the US population is.
So we have results coming in. Once we hit around 180 student responses, we can go ahead and move forward. We're at 173. Maybe we'll give them a little more time. So community members answer this separately. Community members answer through the Zoom poll. So what we're going to share back to you all looks different from what students are saying. Community members are guessing 6 million units. Students are guessing 4.7. So when you're ready, you can tell us what the answer is.
Yeah, so guys, community members were right. Brazil has a housing unit deficit of over 6 million units, which is a lot. If we consider that we have, a smaller population in comparison to the US, we're still one of the most populated countries in the world, but we have this huge gap on housing access. And what is more shocking is that if you look into the amount of available and empty housing units in the country, we are talking about around 11 million places that could actually be housing people. So there are more available places than unhoused people, but for reasons that the market knows well, the people can't access those houses. So this is why a homeless workers movement is so important in Brazil. And how this movement works. This is a picture of one of our occupations. So basically what the MTST does is that we do a lot of research and we find empty plots of land in the middle of the city, a terrain that is not being used for nothing. They have debts with the municipality, debts with the national government. They don't pay their taxes. No, they're just there for market speculation. And we occupy that area. And we occupy that area based on our constitution. because Brazilian Constitution from 1988, in one of its articles, has established that all private property in our country must have social function and that housing is a right. So we go and we enter those places and we build all those little tents. Each of those tents represent a family that could have a house there. And those families, they maintain their tents and they stay in this land, having assemblies and making protests until we get the state to negotiate with us. Our objective is not to stay in these very precarious tents. Our objective is to use this occupation as leverage to have a conversation with the government in a level we would never access if we weren't pressuring them through these methods until we get them to give us social housing. This happens through Minha Casa Minha Vida program, My House My Life program, a program that was designed by Lula that provides social housing for people. So the government builds whole units, whole buildings. But there is a particular method within that program, which is called My House, My Life entity. So they give the movement the power to control the project. So the MTST will design the blueprint. We will choose the contractors. We will decide on where the community garden in our public house unit will be, you know? So it's a very special mechanism in which all those families take part of. But before I show you how those units look like when they are ready and conquered, I want to show you the picture of what happens if we zoom in into this occupation. Whenever we occupy a plot of land, the first thing we build, the very first tent we build, is a kitchen. So this is one of those little kitchens in the middle of all those tents. And we will divide that big area in squares. So each square will have its community kitchen, and it's where the people occupying will cook their meals together collectively. They will have breakfast very early in the morning before going to the assembly. They will eat before the demonstrations. They will have dinner after, and they will talk, and they will establish connections. Connections that I said in the beginning will break the neoliberal project of turning those people into isolated individuals subjected to all sorts of horrible things capitalism can indulge them. They make connections. They bring themselves together around food. They talk, they connect, and the movement grows. Grows to a point that we achieve victory. So this is one of the units we built. This is a project made by the movement. You can see there are balconies on those social houses. There is a community garden. The women are celebrated with keys in their hands because property is transferred to the women of the family. So there are several mechanisms that we can go into this particular process, but this is not the topic tonight. So before I continue and present you what we did around food, I just want to check if there are any particular questions on housing policy in Brazil and how the homeless workers movement has achieving those victories so far. And then we continue the lecture to the core of our topic tonight.
So students and community members, we encourage you to use the Q&A feature right now if you have any questions about what Pedro has shared so far. Pedro, we do have a question. Does the MTST have any interaction with or collaboration with the Movimento dos, I don't speak Portuguese, Trabalhadores Rurais Sem Terra? MST? Yeah.
Cool, great question. Yeah. So originally, the groups that founded the MTST, some of them, they were part of the MST, but the MST is the landless workers movement. So they operate outside the city, in the countryside, fighting for land access. At some point, it becomes important to have an urban movement, and we work together. So the MTST and the MST are part of important movements coalition. So the MST, the landless workers movement, is the biggest campesino movement in Brazil, and the MTST, the homeless workers movement, is the biggest urban movement in the country. And they work together, they fight together, they are in several coalitions together. And spoiler, solidarity kitchens are also connecting them. But I'll get to that in the end of the presentation, so I don't run the process of how we got to the point that food produced by MST settlements and small farmers connected to MST are now getting to the cities in the solidarity kitchens run by the MST. I guess we can continue, Taylor, or is there any other
We have
question? Yeah, go
another
on.
question. You have time for one more? Okay. How does criminalization from the government affect MTST efforts, if at all?
Yeah, a lot. So whenever we occupy a plot of land, the first 24 hours are very, very crucial because if they get an injunction from a judge or an eviction order, they can get us out of there really quickly. After those first 24 hours, it gets harder for them to get us out. And police in Brazil, it still has remains of the dictatorship periods. So we have a military police, which is highly violent and trained to oppress social movements. Uh, you wouldn't be surprised if I tell you that they are learning US techniques or they are importing techniques and equipment from Israel to use all these global technology of repression against our social movements. However, we resist. So during Bolsonaro regime, he said that anyone fighting for land or house would be considered terrorists, that they would, end the MTST and end the occupations. And that's not what happened. He is in jail, and we now have one of Lula's minister from our movement. So the situation kind of changed. But so let us jump into the food topic right now. So for us to get started, I prepared this other question here. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the hunger map. So the UN has this hunger map, right? So they list countries that are below the hunger line. So that countries that have more than 2.5%, I guess, from the population under severe hunger. Um, and um, and they also have a general monitoring system for food insecure in its different layers. So here there are some interesting options that I want to read them out loud with you so we can think them through. So one of the options is that Brazil is not in the hunger map since 2014, after 11 years of progressive policies led by Lula and Dilma. The other is yes, since 2018 because of Temer and Bolsonaro's dismantled social policies. So Temer is a president who was part of a coup, a parliamentary coup that took Dilma from the Workers' Party out, and after that, Bolsonaro got elected, and they dismantled policies led by Lula and Dilma previously. Option C is not since 2025 with Lula's return to government. And option D is yes, since Bolsonaro, who governed until 2014 and led the country to half of the population facing food insecurity, half of the Brazilian population, and over 33 million people in severe hunger. Just for you to have a comparison, I was checking the US data with the food program that Trump just ended. You have around like 14% in food insecurity level. We are saying more than 50% of Brazilian population under food insecurity under Bolsonaro, and 33 million facing hunger specifically. So which one you think is the situation of Brazil right now? We are or we are not in the hunger map?
I'm going to share out what the community thought with everyone. Hopefully you can see this too, Pedro. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyone is actually wrong no one is actually wrong on this, because it's true that in 2014, Brazil left the hunger map. Before 2014, we were in the hunger map. But then, after 11 years of, Bolsa Familia and Fome Zero programs and valuing salaries and decreasing under people without work, and then all those progressive policies, we left the hunger map. But then it's also true that in 2018 we got back to the hunger map, and it got worse with Bolsonaro, which is what D is saying. So with Bolsonaro, it's true that we had half of the population facing food insecurity, which is over, I don't know, 125 million people, and over 33 million people facing hunger. And when Lula got elected, he reestablished many of the social programs, which led Brazil to leave the hunger map for the second time. So the very correct answer is C. So we are not in the hunger map anymore because Lula got us out of there with the strength of social movement, a lot of mobilizing from civil society during those horrible years, so that the government could come back and reestablish the social policies that we are going to talk a little bit. Well, now let's talk about the movement. When I was describing you the situation in the pandemic, right? When people were boiling bones, bones became a symbol of hunger in Brazil. And this is a picture of one of the protests that we did in the main stock market, Ibovespa from Brazil, kind of your Wall Street, kind of. So we went there, the movement occupied the stock market, protesting against hunger, holding bones. The thing is, because we are a grassroots movement, we try to organize, whatever we could to assist people during the pandemic. We realized that just, collecting food baskets and distributing them to people was far from enough, because we would give them food baskets and they would just say, well, thank you, but I don't have the money for gas. They couldn't cook the food they were receiving. And people were getting burned because they were trying to cook using gasoline and other stuff. So what the movement decided to do was to build solidarity kitchens to cook the meals and distribute them for free. And this is when we started the solidarity kitchens. This is one of them. This is the one the movie happens in. So for those who watched it, this is a different moment in the film. It has passed some time since it was inaugurated, so it looks a little bit different. This little garden they were initiating at the construction is this huge little forest now already. So you can see the community garden growth in the film. But this is in Brasilia. And this is one of the 56 solidarity kitchens the movement inaugurated. And besides those regular kitchens, they are feeding thousands of people in 17 states in Brazil. In total, since we initiated, it's more than 8 million meals that we have distributed ourselves with donations and with militant work. We are distributing proper meal, and we are employing over 120 cooks. We are buying all this agroecological food and getting all this, diverse chain going on and distributing free food in over 56 kitchens now. But besides them, we also initiated the emergency solidarity kitchens. So this picture behind is one of the floods that we had last year in Brazil, in Porto Alegre, in the south. And of course, you all know the impacts of environmental racism in urban centers, and this is no difference. There is no different in Brazil. The Black and poor communities are the one suffering most of climate change consequences, even though they are the ones that least contribute to those changes. And in some areas, we were delivering food using boats. And we are building these emergency kitchens whenever there is a climate extreme event to at least provisionary guarantee to people access to proper meal. And you can see the line of production here in the pictures. And before I go any further, I want to go back in time a little bit because this idea, the idea of solidarity kitchens, they don't come out of nowhere. And I could bring many examples of how kitchens are important for social struggle throughout different political processes and in different countries. But I brought two. One is, of course, the US, and you're all familiar with what the Black Panthers did with the free breakfast program for kids, you know? And again, this was not only about feeding people and ending hunger and this very material need. It was mostly about community building. People were getting connected to the movement. The movement was growing. The movement was the families were getting involved. This was an essential part of this movement. And the same thing in Argentina with the comedores populares, the popular kitchens. However, with Javier Milei, current Argentina president, who is also a Trump ally, he decided to cut all aid to those popular kitchens. So this picture here is not a picture of the kitchen working. It's a picture of the people from the popular movement in Argentina protesting for the kitchens to receive the funds they have been receiving, but now with Milei, they don't receive anymore. So they say food crisis is a problem. The pens are here. Children are starving. Those are the messages in the signs here. So this proves again that social movements can learn a lot from each other. We, the MTST, we visited Argentina several times to learn about their solidarity kitchens. And now Argentinians are also, learning with us about what we did with our solidarity kitchens. And they're even, considering changing the names of their kitchens and the processes that we used in our case. And why is Milei cutting aid for food? Why is Trump cutting aid for those 14% of the population that I mentioned that need food assistance? Why going after the population at this level? And the answer for me is because of how powerful this is. Really, they know the power of this. So this is what happens besides people getting fed, right? First of all, you have this strong connection between the farmers in the countryside and the urban workers. And this connection between the struggle in the countryside and the struggle in the cities is a very important connection for us to have right now, especially in the climate crisis moment we are living. And those in power, they know that. So they want to end that possibility of connection, that possibility of the biggest urban social movements connecting to the workers in rural areas and buying from small farmers and not from the big agribusiness that is, just giving profit to Cargill and other gigantic corporations that are destroying the Amazon and the Cerrado and trying to ship soy to the US, China, and Europe and turning Brazil into this big monocultural farm. So we are doing something different. We're challenging that model when we do this. And they know that. That's why they have so much fear. That's why they cut this type of aid. But also because of what the other pictures show, we are building community. We have, Christmas parties there. We have, workshops and women are, reading Black Brazilian feminist books together for the first time, accessing knowledge produced by their ancestrals about the struggle, and they are learning collectively. And the solidarity kitchens are being used to prepare students for, university exams or kids to have, activities out once they finish school, so they don't end up doing nothing at home or getting into I don't know, messed up stuff on the streets. So these places, they become a community center, and they become a very powerful grassroots organizing tool at the territory level. And this is a key thing, really, because now we don't have the factories anymore. Like, you don't organize workers on a strike on the line of the factory anymore. That's not how economy works anymore. With gig workers, with app workers, with, this deep neoliberal system dismantling everything that we knew before. So where can you organize people? In their neighborhoods. That's the only place you can organize people right now. And I'm sure you know that in the US from what I've been following on how also the right wing knows that, and how everybody's trying to get to neighborhoods and trying to organize locally communities. In Brazil, that happens a lot with evangelical churches, now Pentecostal churches. My grandpa, for instance, he converted to now Pentecostalism, and for some of his friends there in church, it was the first time they were having a birthday party was when the church organized that, because they were so alone. They were going to work and coming back and, fighting their daily battles and not having anything else than, surviving capitalism. And the only place they find community sometimes is in church. But with solidarity kitchens and with grassroots work from the homeless workers movement in those neighborhoods, they're also finding community in a social movement that wants to dismantle the roots that provide the strength of the system that leads them to that loneliness. So we're not only, a nice place to be, we're also challenging the sources of oppression. So this is the big difference between finding community sometimes in a church-based level in Brazil. Sometimes churches are very progressive, sometimes they're very conservative and right-wing. And then you find a place in which you have all these things happening. And people coming to the kitchen, they're not leftists at all. Most of the people, even in the homeless workers movement base, those camping for houses, they voted for Bolsonaro. If you watch our film, the one we shared, you're going to see that one of the MTST coordinators there, she's now, leading the process for Lula's inauguration. She voted for Bolsonaro. This is the majority of the population when they elected Bolsonaro. It was an expression of that time of deluded workers, mostly men, but also women, a lot of evangelical people, a lot of black people, people that Bolsonaro was actively damaging their lives, but they voted for him. So these places, they also began to be a place where those different types of knowledge, experiences and knowledges meet face to face, not, in this online troll, red pill, crazy shit, whatever happens online. These are people. They are in line together. They're holding a plate of food and looking to their neighbors, kind of seeing each other and building a connection that if it wasn't for the kitchens, that wouldn't happen. But there's something else that happens. We build political power. The women there holding that bone I showed you, she's a Gianni Maria. She's she has been a militant from the MTST. She migrated from the Northeast, as many black women and Northeastern women do in Brazil, and to work as a housemaid in São Paulo. And she got elected the first ever housemaid in the State Assembly of São Paulo. So now this amazing black woman is leading all this amazing law project and fighting the extreme right wing in parliament. And she came from this process. She is one of the creators of the Solidarity Kitchens. And now she's a legislator. She's, with no illusions on that institutional space, she's there. She's doing the fight at another level. And also, Guilherme Boulos, the one I mentioned, he used to be the movement coordinator, also one of the persons that created the Solidarity Kitchens. And now he's a minister at Lula government. And he's leading, demonstrations like this one against the attempts of the right wing to take Bolsonaro out of jail and give amnesty to all the coup perpetrators. Because of our grassroots work and because of many other social movements' grassroots work in Brazil, we got thousands and thousands to take the streets, like in this picture. And we are continuing that mobilization because we know that we won the election against Bolsonaro, but that did not end fascism in our country, and that didn't end Bolsonarism. Quite the opposite. Lula won, but by a very thin margin. And if we don't continue grassroots work, the extreme right wing can come back at any time, including now with Flavio Bolsonaro, the Bolsonaro son, the guy I showed you at the beginning. Finally, I want to say some like two last outcomes of the Solidarity Kitchens process. First, we managed to turn this movement effort into law. Boulos, the guy I showed you before he became Lula's minister, he was elected the most voted left congressman from São Paulo for our national parliament. And once we got there, I used to work with him and others from the movement, we managed to introduce a law bill changing Solidarity Kitchens into law. And the way we did that was including Solidarity Kitchens into the PAA, the Program for Food Acquisition. This program for food acquisition is a way for the government, through public purchasing, they buy from local farmers and they distribute that agroecological food into schools, hospitals, prisons, any public space run by the government. But they also now, because of our legislation, Solidarity Kitchens will receive funds from the state, and they will also receive the ingredients coming from this program of food acquisition. So we are institutionally linking the farmers, small farmers, with urban centers. And this is law now. This is an official national program. So from, crowdfunding and donations and, us going like crazy, building Solidarity Kitchens with our own hands, putting the actual bricks for kitchens to exist, and getting donations and cooking that and distributing meals. And if you saw the film, if you watch the film, you kind of got the vibe of how grassroots this struggle is. Now we have a full law that implements our program. And we didn't stop there. We realized that we could even develop further connection between the small farmers and local growers to the urban centers. So we created the Solidarity Fairs. So this is a picture of one of these fairs. So our congressmen and congresswomen, they can access a certain level of budget, and we use that budget to buy from local farmers, and we bring that to the periphery areas of São Paulo. We're starting with São Paulo, and we distribute tons of food for free. So the inhabitants of that neighborhood, they can circulate on the Solidarity Fair and choose the ingredients they want to get, and they come directly from those local farmers or settlements from the MST, the Landless Workers Movement, or the movement of the small agricultural producers, the MPA. So from different settlements around the city, we bring that food to the periphery areas of São Paulo, the poor areas, and people can get that for free. So I'll finish here, so we have time, to have a proper conversation and questions, and I can go deeper into some of the points you're more interested in. I tried really to bring you an overview of this movement and of the power of the Solidarity Kitchens. But as I said, since the beginning, we see them as a tool for social organizing and territorial based community growth. But in this process, we learned so much, and we realized the importance of connecting our struggle to the climate crisis struggle. So right now in COP, for instance, we were there, all the social movements in COP. We had the People's Summit a gathering of thousands and thousands of all over the world, people coming to Brazil, and all of them got fed by solidarity kitchens that were run by different social movements, and the MTST, of course, was there bringing all the experience of our solidarity kitchens. So this particular tool not only is serving us to organize locally and to fight hunger objectively, but it's also being a new way of making summits like this. Instead of commissioning some sort of, company to provide food or giving people like tickets, like solidarity kitchens are feeding these big gatherings, or they also feed, the Freeland Camp. I was just mentioning, Amanda, before our lecture started, when thousands of indigenous people are going to Brasilia next week, gathering there. Each delegation will bring, a stove. They will they will create their own kitchen, So it's also a way for movements to grow in their independency and to learn that while we claim an alternative world, we can already establish alternative practices. So we can already serve agroecological food when we are fighting for climate justice. We can already serve free food with no poison, no pesticides out of the agribusiness chain when we are fighting against that monoculture model. So we can anticipate some of those reivindications in our praxis. So this is really the message I wanted to bring to you all tonight.
Thank you so much. I know I'm inspired, and having sort of watched the political trajectory over the last decade in Brazil, it gives me hope, what you've shared with us. So thank you. We have some great questions. I'm gonna move the slide over one. One from Dr. Leslie Hui, who's a professor here in urban planning and does food systems work. Does the MTST have a structured process to help elect movement organizers or leaders into state government or legislative positions?
Yes, we do. We decided as a movement to enter a political party, and we have our political group within that political party. So decisions on who is running, it's all made collectively, and also the preparation for that campaign to happen. And for us to sustain that as a collective, because it's really hard to become a public figure. And if you watch the film, you can also see that process with some of those women there, because it's particularly hard when you come from a marginalized group. So some of our biggest public figures are Black women who were in their entirely lives subjected to political places that are far distant from a parliament. And building the confidence, like the trust for you to, give a public speech the meetings and everything. This is a collective process. And of course, they are amazing people. Like they have, a fascinating energy in them to undertake this collective task, but they are not alone in this. And was very important for the movement since the beginning. And we have a whole political process within the movement for those quadras to exist. So I myself, I entered the MTST through a process that we call the brigades. So we enlist people to get to the movement and engage and be part of that. And then there are people that enter the movement by, enlisting themselves when they occupy the area because they need access for housing, for instance. So there are different ways for the movement to grow and to structure itself as a political organization. And when we decided to enter institutional politics, we also decided not to leave the grassroots organizing side of things, because that can be a common mistake for social movements when they decide to enter institutional politics. And we didn't want to give our territorial efforts any less energy. So we also have some internal separation, of like to make sure that we are taking care of all fronts. Because now we have people in the executive government. I mentioned Bolos, but we also have the periphery secretary. Lula created a ministry of cities for the first time. So if you're studying urban planning, you might be interested in looking into that. And within the Ministry of Cities, we have the Secretary for Peripheries. And the Secretary for Peripheries is a comrade from the homeless workers movement, who is leading revolutionary measures. Like he's ensuring that everyone in Brazil now has a zip code. This is new. And this policy came from our bases, like from a very concrete need that you can't get mail in your house in favelas in the Brazilian slums because you don't have a zip code. He is ensuring a very innovative process to reduce risk in peripheries and communities, climate risk. So communities are developing their own adaptation and climate risk control plans. So the movement has this whole structure not only to ensure that our mandates in legislative level operate well, but also to ensure that what we are doing as a policy at the executive government right now and at grassroots organizing and the struggle on the territories, they all continue in a coordinated way and we have a successful process in this.
Thank you so much. We have another question. This is a hybrid question between Taylor Moore and Amanda, our co-instructor. So Taylor Moore says, I think this is a fantastic presentation. I'm thinking about conscientização and how we can build solidarity in Northwest Michigan. Taylor's curious where the money comes from to buy the food for the meals. And Amanda's curious sort of who raised the funds and how when the movement first started and how long before legislation happened.
Yeah, so we still depend on donations for the Solidarity Kitchens to exist. So roughly, we have a Apoia-se link. Maybe we can put in the chat. I can send you, or if, I don't know, any of you, Taylor or Marisa, maybe if you could just Google Apoia-se Cozinha Solidária, there is a link there. So, but also like if any of you from the US want to support us somehow with bigger donations, we can find ways for the money to get to the movement. So you're all welcome to contribute. So when we started, it was all crowdfunding. Then we started having bigger donations, of like foundations or making like adjustments and cooperation with different projects to develop kitchens in each context. So it really depends. In some of the cases, we built the kitchens using ecological bricks. So we were making the bricks ourselves, so costs were very reduced, and that would be connected to some university project, for instance, on how to build more sustainably, and through that partnership we can get some money. So we developed the different types of strategies that a movement can develop. Now, when the movement became official political policy, the money comes from the government in some instance and from the food acquisition program that I mentioned, the PAA, but then it's a direct purchasing of the ingredients and the transfer of the ingredients to the kitchen. So we don't really run the money that goes through the PAA. We receive the ingredients in the kitchen. So yeah, we still rely a lot on donations for the kitchens to exist, especially the emergency kitchens right now. So as I said, climate extreme events are happening more and more. You all know, we all follow what's happening in the US. It's so horrible. And we know who suffers most. So ensuring a fast approach on those cases, it's very important, but it's also a way to politicize those. Those are not natural disasters. They were caused by political decisions in light of very well-known climate factors, in geographical elements in each case. So when we do this work, we are also making that contestation. In Porto Alegre, for instance, when the floods happened, we occupied this huge building in the middle of the city to say, hey, a lot of the people that lost their homes, they wouldn't have lost their homes if they were living here, in a refurnished building, like a retrofit, or like when you rebuild I don't know the word in English, sorry. When you fix an old building for people to live in, so just provide that housing in the empty buildings you have in the city center as a way to fight climate crisis and environmental racism. So emergency kitchens are also about that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and we will be sure to send out a link in our newsletter. It goes out once a week to how many thousands of people?
Like
2,000?
3,500
3,500.
all over
Yeah,
the
so
place.
we'll spread the word for sure. Thank you so much. Let's see here. More questions. Um, we can go with Susanna's. I wonder if you know this, Pedro. I mean, you spoke about this a little bit, but have there been programs similar to the Solidarity Kitchens in the US? You just spoke about Black Panthers, but do you know of any others?
No, what I know is that I was also when I met Julius, I was in this debate with the whole good food purchasing network, right? So people that are trying to find ways, very limited in the US context, to actually have more responsible food purchasing mechanisms and stimulate this type of cooperation. When I say that you can use Solidary Kitchens as a model, of course, you can't just replicate what we did in the US context. But for me, it's about understanding the importance of local community organizing and the importance of food in that process. So maybe you can develop, different types of things considering this knowledge. Maybe the Black Panthers can be an inspiration, the Comedores Populares from Argentina can be an inspiration, Brazil can be an inspiration. But above all, like just don't give up fascism and be very creative on the ways you can develop community organizing and research in this context. All this that I'm saying here, the Solidarity Kitchens, we have a deep relation with researchers on food, on public health, on urban planning in Brazil. We are debating with academics in very deep ways to think of the best strategies to actually change reality towards a more justice context. So perhaps there are, very small initiatives in the US on community-based kitchens that I don't know of. But if I mean, I think they're all very valid and important, and no matter how small they are. The one thing that I really like to stress when people ask me about the possibilities of replicating things like this is that the political element has to come with it, right? Because I know that I've been in the US many times. Like I've seen people distributing food for free on the street, right, for homeless people. That exists, like hot soup in a cold winter day, and that's fundamental. But there is this step, there's another layer, not even a step. There's another layer you can add to that, which is organizing that politically. So there has to be pressure for political shift. There has to be engagement in, I don't know, Mandani's election if you're feeding the homeless in New York, like, and you're not campaigning to elect someone, those things need to work somehow connected. Otherwise, Paulo Freire, a great Brazilian scholar, has this saying, of how we need to differentiate true solidarity from false charity. So it doesn't help if you just keep giving the hand for the wretched of the earth, for the people that need help. You need to make the conditions for those hands to raise themselves. And that's what we do, so fight hunger, but fight the roots of hunger. Otherwise, you might be assisting the hunger system at somehow if you don't add this other layer, so yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that important nuance.
Can I
Let's go.
can I can
Oh,
I
go
chime
ahead.
in just as a reflection, Taylor, on this? And Julia's put in the chat and can mention more about very local examples of this happening. But having been involved with I'm super inspired by everything, in particular the move from the organizing and the relationships that were built to political action and electing people. And I would say that it's a place that the food system in the US is still behind. In the last 15 years or so, we've had the rise of food policy councils as one of those sort of formalizing the mechanisms of connecting to one another. And that's happened across Michigan, across the US really, really strongly. And those folks are like getting their feet and are really good at identifying issues they care about, problems they want to change, etc. But the move in the food system to getting people elected in particular has been behind where kind of corporate agribusiness and other agricultural interests are in the US in terms of getting people elected and into office. And my own background is both in doing food policy and having been in an elected office. So I see that gap as really still crucial, and I'm really, really inspired about how that movement has happened in Brazil, and see that as like really an inspiration for where we need to still move to in a more conscious and organized way in the US. So it's my reflection, and thank you so much on that.
No, thank you, Amanda. Yeah, and this is a very crucial reflection. I know that this is a reflection that many social movements are having right now around the world. Like our comrades in the housing movement in South Africa, like we've been talking a lot to them on how, you know, a movement can enter a electoral process because it's brutal. We know how parties work, and in the US, it's even more. So, you need to be prepared. So this is why the organizing element is so important. So when you create a solidarity kitchen, for instance, you have the coordinators of the kitchen. Those are the people talking to the other community members, and then you have the assemblies, and you have a tracking system to see who is there in the assemblies. Like you need to see who's coming every day. That's a process of how you build quadros. It's not enlightened people coming and asking or it's not enough to have a very good idea either. Like this is a battle of communication many times, but it's also a very pragmatic environment. So as I said, a lot of people that come to the kitchens, they don't even consider themselves left necessarily. Um, Even less in the occupations. Like a lot of people there are workers that haven't been in contact with not even the party structure. And in Brazilian politics, we have hundreds of parties with very hard names, so it's even hard for people to understand that. And there's a second level of challenges, I think, which is people's discredit in institutional politics, which I'm sure you all see in the US. It's like, yeah, not really. Even among those in food chains or whatever, like people are completely alienated from institutional politics because it's not worth it. Oh, it's all the same. Like, with no point. So there's a whole process of us convincing ourselves that this is a battle to be taken, and 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 for me, the switch happens when we manage to offer people imagination and not only resist. So i- in the context we operate sometimes, it's so hard, that people are just, enduring reality. And the right wing comes with a project, with an imaginary world that is very sexy and very nice and very. So for us, it was about allowing people to dream again, and oh, hey, so I can dream about having a house. Like this is a possible dream for me. This is one of the sayings that in the film, one of the women they say that, Bisa. She was like, I was working so hard every day and coming back, late to my kids at home, like a single mom. And, I didn't have time to study. I didn't have time to do anything. I was just tired. I wouldn't have time to think about life because I was just, getting life going. Um, and then with the movement, I realized I could have dreams. Like I could dream about having my house. That was a possible dream. And she gets emotional in this moment at the film. She was like, and then that's what the movement gave her, and that's what the movement and social movements give to people in general. There's a magic thing when you get engaged in something that makes you dream about something and not just, living a mechanic life. So this is the trigger also with institutional politics. Like this has to happen. Like that dream, that enchantment, that passion, that the passion needs to happen. At the same time, you have the pragmatic aspects that I was referring. So I don't think there's a particular model to replicate, but I would pay attention to all those layers.
Great, thank you so much for that. It's about time for us to transition into sort of community food goings on. So thank you so much, Pedro. This was a particularly inspiring talk, I know, for me and by the looks of the chat for many others. So thanks for joining us and sharing out with us. We will be sharing some of this with folks in our newsletter, and then the recording will go up on our website and on YouTube later this week, so folks can access this knowledge for the rest of time. So thank you. Amanda, take it away.
Julius is going to do a little local plug first, and then I'll take it away.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you again, Pedro. Really inspiring. So glad that you said yes and joined us this evening. And just want to plug a couple of things. After having met you, last fall at that event, started thinking about some of the policy pieces and what's happening in our community, and just want to give a quick highlight of two things happening in our community in real time. One of the policy pieces that we've been working on, both locally but also nationally, is thinking around the right to food. So I'd encourage folks to learn more about that. There's a national community of practice. I think that's part of the framework in some other communities like Brazil, that sort of set the stage for work that can happen that can't happen in the same way in our communities, in our country. And the other is there's an event that happens every third Sunday here in Ypsilanti at the Ypsilanti Farmers Marketplace downtown, called Around the Kitchen Table. And I think that's, to me, just a really good example, a local example of how we're sort of doing this sort of solidarity kitchen-like work. But there's a lot of mutual aid network work happening across Washtenaw County. Around the Kitchen Table is a grassroots effort. It's volunteers doing the work. It's volunteers funding the meal, and there's upwards of 300 to 400 people showing up every meal. And it just started 3 years ago with a light partnership that we have with some community members, and has grown and developed and built out since then. I'll pass it on to you, Amanda.
Yeah, so we encourage you to get involved. A couple of last things. One, on campus, there are in dining sustainability summer internships. So heads up on that. And this other event we're sharing is from the North American Food System Network. So if you're someone looking for careers in this area, that's a great organization for you to connect with and join. And this is specifically a webinar series they have teaching folks about opportunities for emerging professionals in this space. So there's still a couple good ones coming up with some great speakers from a variety of sectors. So encourage you to check that out. We included it in the last week's weekly newsletter, and we'll do so again. And then really, I'm just plugging next week the Farmers Land Trust and the Farmland Commons. We did have a swap out from who was originally scheduled, but really excited for Ian and Christina. Julius, you want to do any other plug for them? Because these are folks Julius knows well.
Yeah, just a quick plug. Ian and Christina, they've been doing work with the Farmers Land Trust nationally. They've got a couple of projects that they are helping to steward here in Michigan. Really just starting off early, maybe late last year with some of those, but really have developed a really unique and innovative model for land access for stewards and growers. And I'm excited for them to get to share more about that next week.
Yeah. So that's all that we have this evening. Thank you so much, Pedro. This was definitely one of my favorite sessions, and I feel so inspired. And I think this is a time that we are lucky that we're in the age of the internet where we can be connected to people all over the world. And wherever we are, our own political situation, our own social, our own economic situation is what it is, we have the chance in this age to be connected and thus inspired and learning from the people leading the way, and find that solidarity among those of us who've experienced similar things, even in our very different geographic contexts. So to me, this is really incredible chance, and it makes me excited to actually bring in more international speakers for the class next year, because I think this is a time where international learning and sharing and exchange is so important. So thank you so much, Pedro and everyone, for this evening. We look forward to seeing you next week. Only 2 more weeks of speakers and class left, I want to note that we pushed the Fast Food for Thought, which is an in-person event for our April 14th class, but you can also still watch it live stream. So that will be live stream via the Zoom link, I think. So even if you're not local, please still plan, because we've got some great speakers coming from U of M faculty and staff with 5-minute lightning talks about their work. So you can join us either way. Thank you so much, and we hope everyone has a really good night. Thanks, Pedro.